You have put out a press release saying that you are putting forward plans to launch Eldridge, an asset management and insurance holding company, plans to launch in January. But just tell us about what you're envisioning for this fund.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and it's great to be here with you in Abu Dhabi. It's always a treat to come to this part of the world and get so excited to see all the great things that are going on here. So, yeah, we are now consolidating our asset management activity. Over the last decade or so, we've been building specific businesses that have been focused on whether it's private credit with Marathon or equipment financing and leasing with Stonebriar. You know, we have Security Benefit, one of the leading retirement platforms in the U.S. So because of the themes and the trends that are going on and the value of scale, we're now consolidating all of that and putting it under one holding company. And when we launch in January, we'll have about $70 billion of assets under management.
And you say it's not going to launch until January. From now until then, have you been in conversations with investors from the region? Are you looking to sell a stake potentially?
We're absolutely trying to be strategic. So we're looking for partners who want to grow with us. And obviously, this region, you know, we're about to open our first office here. So we'll be doing that also at the start of the year. So I think the combination of the excitement that's going on here, we believe that this is going to be one of the most important places in the world over the next several decades. So the combination of being able to develop the relationships here and also build businesses together. We've been in business with many people in the region for a long time, and now we want to continue to extend and expand those relationships.
Yeah, well, you talk about opening offices here. That's also in the press release. You have offices all around the world, but also have plans to open up an office in Abu Dhabi. Why Abu Dhabi?
We believe that the region is extremely important, and we think Abu Dhabi is a great first place to put our first Eldridge office. But we have plans to continue to develop our offices in the region and have a much bigger presence on site.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia potentially. I know lots of investors are having conversations about opening up a regional headquarters there. So potentially something for the future too? Absolutely.
I think, if you look at where the big opportunities are, I think developing sports and entertainment and infrastructure and media, those are all big opportunities in the region, and in particular in Saudi Arabia, because they have so much infrastructure to build.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on that actually, particularly on the sports side of things. We know that in this part of the world, they've really been making a big push into sports in various different domains. Also, I mean, you're actively involved in ownership of various sports teams around the world as well. Do you see an opportunity to invest in sports and sort of to work in parallel with what the authorities are trying to do here?
Absolutely. I think, again, the thing that really has to be built is a lot of infrastructure. And I think the opportunity to build sport infrastructure, I mean, we have a project in D.C. called the St. James. And it's a several 100,000 square foot athletic facility that now is acting as a school, is acting as a place for camps, is acting as a great place to go, because there's very few facilities that have the scale and the size. And ultimately we see that being able to be exported all around the world, in particular to this part of the region, as they really go deep on how do we develop our sport industry, how do we develop our youth. And given the average age of the people in this part of the world, we just think there's so much opportunity to build sports infrastructure.
Yeah, and in previous interviews, you've talked a lot about the ability of businesses to actually build up scale. Do you see that potential in this part of the world? Because, of course, there's a lot of focus on beefing up the potential of these certain industries that we talk about. But at the same time, it's not as populous as other parts of the world. Are the demographics working against you here?
I don't think so. I think if you look at what needs to be built relative to what's has been built and what the aspirations are, and the fact that this is an area that's attracting people. People are coming here for all the energy and all the goodness that's the opportunity that's here. Very stable leadership, very young leadership. Yeah. A really bright future.
Yeah. Let me take it to sort of broad macro and the outlook for next year. I've spoken to several industry leaders over the last month, even before the elections, by the way, and people seem to be quite optimistic about the possibility for deal making and M&A activity to resume in 2025. How do you see the outlook?
I think people are really excited about the where the markets are. I think they're really excited about the landscape for investment. I think they're happy that the election's over and we're now moving on and back to kind of business again. I think the interest rate environment is settled into a place where people start to feel like there's a lot that can be happening again. So we're very bullish on M&A. We're very bullish on the activity, the velocity of capital moving around going forward. So I think we're excited to be involved in the financial markets next year for sure.
Yeah, and how do you think about the potential for a higher interest rate environment? Yesterday we had the Fed Chair Jerome Powell talking about moving cautiously with interest rates. I think now people are sort of coming around to the view that maybe inflation will be higher than what was previously envisioned for 2025. How does that have a knock-on effect to your portfolio if we are going to be in a higher interest rate environment for foreseeable future?
Well, one of the things that we were able to do is we owned a third of our assets are in floating rate assets.
Yeah.
So as rates have moved, we've been able to benefit from that in a pretty significant way. I think going forward, a 10-year that sits between 4 and 4.5%, is more normal than people feel because it's been such a low interest rate environment for so long. But I think as the front end of the curve comes down and the 10-year stabilizes between 4 and 4.5, I think we see that that's a more normal environment than a 10-year that's at 2%.
Yeah. Well, you say a third of your portfolio is in floating rates, so presumably you're talking about private credit there. There's a lot of hype around private credit. Is there too much hype, do you think? Or are there too many tourists now in this domain?
I think that the asset class itself is very robust. And I think the definition of private credit is one that has evolved. I think the reality is senior secured bank debt has been private credit. It's called broadly syndicated bank debt, but it's actually private credit. I think the evolution of the markets I think will continue to allow for more and more private credit. But as private credit becomes a solution, it's just one more option. All right? Yeah. So I think we're going to continue to see markets embrace private credit, whether it's asset finance like at Stonebriar or private corporate credit like at Marathon. We think that those are big opportunities in markets that are continue to develop, especially geographically. Yesterday we were with the Minister of Investments in Saudi Arabia, and they're talking about how do we develop our credit markets. And so I think there's more and more opportunity. I think you're going to see more and more deal flow out of Japan. So we think the credit markets around the world are just going to continue to develop and evolve.
Yeah, interesting. And there aren't that many asset classes out there where you can still get double-digit return. Final question for you. What keeps you up at night? What are you most concerned about going into 2025? What is the biggest risk?
I think obviously geopolitically, there's a lot that no one can control. And I think that we're very hopeful and aspirational about the resolution of the challenges that we see, and are hopeful that our representatives are looking to kind of resolve these things and figure out how to coexist more peacefully. Because I think if we can sort that out, then everything else is pretty easy.